Secret Alliance. From the very first film onward, Magneto and Professor X may have been working together in a coordinated strategy to manipulate both humans and mutants. This theory argues that their apparent ideological war is largely staged, with Magneto acting as the terrifying example that makes Xavier's peaceful coexistence agenda look reasonable by comparison. In the original X-Men from 2000, Xavier clearly knows Magneto is active, yet never uses Cerebro on screen to directly hunt him down, which some fans take as possible evidence that he is not treating Magneto like a purely mortal enemy. Magneto's extremist attacks at Liberty Island, and later at the White House, frequently end in ways that conveniently justify harsher anti-mutant policies, which the theory frames as indirectly making Xavier's more moderate coexistence agenda look like the safest option. Their private conversations in X-Men First Class and Days of Future Past are unusually intimate and strategic, which some fans read as them acting like co-authors of a long game rather than simple rivals. The chess games, especially in the prison scene and later in The Last Stand, are interpreted by fans as literal visual metaphors for ongoing cooperative planning. On several occasions, Magneto spares Xavier and his students when he seemingly has the chance to kill them, implying a shared line neither man is truly willing to cross. This reframes the entire saga as a controlled performance meant to nudge humans toward tolerance via orchestrated crises, rather than a simple hero versus villain dynamic. It casts both men as morally ambiguous manipulators, which fits the franchise's recurring themes about power, extremism, and the costs of leadership. Mercy killing. Wolverine himself, not Professor X's illness, may have actually put the X-Men out of their misery during the mysterious Westchester incident. The film Logan confirms that something called the Westchester incident killed 7 mutants, very likely members of the X-Men, and injured hundreds, and that Charles Xavier's unstable telepathy was involved, but never shows the event directly. According to this theory, Logan, horrified by what Charles's seizures were doing to innocent people, killed his teammates himself to spare them from a slow, agonizing psychic death and to keep Charles from living with the full horror of what he had done. In the film's present, Logan takes primary responsibility for caring for Charles, hides him in Mexico, and constantly insists the professor is not a weapon anymore, suggesting heavy guilt beyond simple caretaker duty. The theory argues that Xavier's confused memories in the film, where he vaguely recalls hurting people in Westchester but not the full truth, could be the result of Logan shielding him from what really happened. Logan's self-destructive drinking and reluctance to talk about the X-Men serve as evidence of trauma associated with an extreme choice. The movie never names which X-Men died at Westchester, leaving room for speculation that Logan might have personally ended some of their suffering, not just that Charles's seizure killed them all. This recasts Logan as the ultimate tragic guardian, willing to shoulder unspeakable sins so Charles can die believing himself merely sick, not a mass murderer. It deepens the film's Western tone, portraying a gunslinger who did one final terrible thing off-screen and will never forgive himself. Poison's supply. Transigen's tampered corn syrup, and even Logan's beloved beer, may be responsible for wiping out mutants and destroying his healing factor. In Logan, Dr. Xander Rice reveals that Transigen secretly spiked fertilizers in processed foods with a chemical that suppresses the X gene, explaining the sharp drop in mutant births. A theory extends this to suggest that this same gene-suppressing compound appears in high-fructose corn syrup, which would contaminate sodas, snacks, and many alcoholic drinks. Logan is shown constantly drinking, especially cheap beer, throughout the film, despite his declining health and healing factor. In fan interpretations, his body may have spent decades fighting both adamantium poisoning and a constant stream of gene-suppressing chemicals, overloading his regenerative abilities. This could also explain why other surviving mutants are in hiding or physically fragile, as they may have unknowingly consumed the same tainted products. The idea turns Logan's coping mechanism into a literal slow poison, adding an ironic twist where his attempt to numb his pain only accelerates his decline. It makes the mutant extinction feel less like fate and more like a quiet corporate atrocity carried out through everyday consumer products. Timeline chaos. 2 prank-happy time travelers, Deadpool and Kitty Pryde, may be responsible for the franchise's chaotic continuity. In X-Men Days of Future Past, Kitty sends Wolverine's consciousness back to 1973, establishing the existence of large-scale temporal manipulation in the movie universe. The mid-credit scenes in Deadpool 2 show Wade using Cable's time device to alter events, including saving Vanessa and even shooting the hated X-Men Origins Wolverine version of himself, directly rewriting history. Fans argue that these overlapping time interventions make the franchise function like a cluster of parallel universes rather than a single clean timeline. Multiple timelines, partially created by fan service time jumps, coexist and intersect, explaining recast characters and inconsistent ages. This theory lets viewers treat the messy continuity as an intentional feature, a meta-joke where Deadpool and Kitty have literally broken the franchise's sense of time. It connects Deadpool more tightly to the core films, beyond simple cameos, suggesting their meddling created the very confusion audiences have been trying to reconcile for years. 3 timelines. The Fox films may not just have 2 timelines, but actually operate across 3 distinct continuities. According to a popular fan theory, one timeline covers the original trilogy era, where events like Jean's Phoenix transformation and the Cure storyline play out in X-Men, X2, and The Last Stand. A second timeline emerges after Days of Future Past, which fixes the Sentinel-dominated future and leads into the prequel cast films like Apocalypse and Dark Phoenix as their own continuity branch. A third, bleaker timeline, centered on standalone spin-offs like Logan, and, in some fan charts, possibly the New Mutants, is one where mutant birth collapse and most heroes are dead or missing. This framework assigns specific films to each track, using clues like character ages, world events such as different versions of the Phoenix Saga, and post-credit scenes to draw boundaries. By embracing 3 timelines, fans can enjoy the strongest entries without forcing them into a single canon. It turns continuity errors into an invitation to mentally curate the universe, allowing viewers to watch the franchise as 3 semi-independent sagas rather than one broken story. Shaw's split. Sebastian Shaw, the main antagonist of X-Men First Class, may have actually caused a major timeline divergence by traveling back in time before the events of that film. According to this theory, Shaw's presence in the same World War II concentration camp as young Magneto is not just coincidence, but evidence of prior temporal interference. His advanced knowledge, technology, and obsession with creating a mutant-ruled world suggest he may have seen future outcomes and tried to reshape history to his advantage. This would make First Class the point where the prequel continuity splinters away from the original trilogy, explaining later casting changes and altered historical events. The idea fits with how Days of Future Past appears to create a changed future, which many fans describe as a new branch instead of a simple fix. This theory gives the often overlooked villain an outsized legacy, as he might have accidentally broken the entire franchise's timeline. It provides a neat origin point for the series' continuity headaches, casting Shaw as a dark mirror to later time travel plots. By the way, if you're enjoying this type of content, I regularly post videos like this. Subscribing would really help me out. Branch future. The film Logan may not show the fixed, hopeful future teased at the end of Days of Future Past, but a grim alternate branch where things still went horribly wrong. Set in 2029, Logan's world feels incompatible with the bright school reunion that closes the corrected 2023 timeline shown in Days of Future Past. Some fan theories suggest the film takes place in a separate offshoot created after that movie, one where the Sentinels were stopped, but other forces like Transigen and corporate exploitation led to mutant extinction. The Westchester incident, Transigen's food-based gene suppression, and the disappearance of most famous mutants all support the idea that this future spiraled out differently from the one where Jean, Cyclops, and others are alive. This branch explanation helps reconcile why Logan remembers the original, darker future events while inhabiting a world that looks like a different disaster. Seeing Logan as just one possible future preserves the emotional ending of Days of Future Past, while letting the film stand as a what-if Western tragedy. It reinforces the idea that in this universe, fixing one apocalypse might simply create room for another. Hidden rescuers. The unseen voices helping the kids cross the border in Logan may belong to the classic New Mutants team. Radio chatter guiding Laura and the other child toward the Canadian safe haven never shows the speakers on screen. According to this theory, those unseen allies are older members of the New Mutants, with some fans naming characters like Danny Moonstar or Sunspot, who survived Transigen and now coordinate the Underground Railroad for escaped kids. The timing lines up with Fox's plans at the time to introduce the team in their own spin-off film. This lets viewers imagine a hidden victory where some students did survive and are quietly saving the next generation, even as Logan dies. It adds a hopeful undercurrent to an otherwise bleak story, suggesting that the fight for mutant survival continues beyond what the camera shows. Weapon propaganda. Wolverine himself may have been effectively created as in-universe anti-mutant propaganda. This theory suggests that Logan, as presented in X-Men Origins Wolverine, functions as a kind of government-crafted narrative, the violent, unstable mutant that proves humans should fear his kind. The Weapon X program's experimentation on him, combined with his use as a living weapon in this reading, supports the idea of a mutant horror story the military could point to if they wanted funding or public support. Throughout the first trilogy, humans frequently cite the danger of powerful mutants when pushing for registration and cures, even though the X-Men themselves are usually trying to prevent catastrophes. The theory reframes Logan's ubiquity in the film franchise as mirroring an in-universe public relations campaign that centers him as the face of mutant violence. This makes Wolverine not just a tragic anti-hero, but a cautionary myth weaponized by human institutions, reinforcing the franchise's themes about fear, control, and narrative power. It also slyly comments on how both Fox and the in-universe government overuse the same character for their own purposes. Gene editing. To explain Sabretooth's radically different look and personality between films, one theory leans on Weapon X gene editing. Victor Creed appears as a more human-looking, articulate character in Origins, but becomes the feral version seen in the original X-Men. Fans suggest that Stryker's program altered his physiology between appearances, leading to the visual and behavioral differences. The later film clearly depicts Sabretooth as part of Weapon X-related operations, and fans retroactively apply that to his earlier X-Men appearance, making the gene editing explanation feel plausible within established lore. It is a tidy way to turn a real-world continuity glitch into in-universe science, similar to how comics justify costume and power level changes over time. Clone fixes. The post-credits tease of Mr. Sinister's company may mean clones are quietly fixing the franchise's continuity problems. The X-Men Apocalypse post-credits scene shows an Essex Corp briefcase collecting Wolverine's blood, widely read as a nod to the classic cloning villain. Fans theorize seriously that clone-heavy storylines involving characters like Cable and his darker counterparts could eventually appear, reflecting 1990s comics where cloning was rampant. Some inconsistencies in character ages, appearances, or sudden re-emergences, such as multiple Emma Frosts across films, might be explained if clones already exist off-screen. The idea meshes with how the Weapon X and Transigen programs already treat mutant DNA as something to harvest and replicate, as seen with X-23 in Logan. The clone theory lets fans fold messy behind-the-scenes decisions into a single, almost elegant in-universe explanation where Sinister has been tinkering with everyone. It also sets up what could have been a wild, comic-accurate future for the franchise, aligning perfectly with excess storytelling from that era. Kennedy Shooter. Mystique may have really assassinated President John F. Kennedy in the movie timeline. Pre-release promotional material for Days of Future Past, including faux in-universe sites and a bent bullet-style article, officially blame Magneto but heavily imply that Mystique may have been the real assassin. In the actual film, Magneto is imprisoned for allegedly killing Kennedy, and he later claims he was trying to save the president because Kennedy was secretly a mutant sympathizer, leaving the true shooter ambiguous. The theory argues that the viral campaign is meant to be in-universe propaganda, where Mystique really did take the shot on Trask's orders, framing Magneto and justifying Sentinel development. This interpretation strengthens her role as a historical assassin, whose actions fuel the anti-mutant policies the X-Men fight against. It turns one of American history's most notorious conspiracies into a cornerstone of this universe, with Mystique as the unseen hand that changes everything. It also dovetails with real-world worries about media spin and manufactured enemies, showing how the films remix history for narrative effect. If you found this valuable, consider subscribing so you are less likely to miss any new content. Thanks for watching.